we leave the cold roads behind for a little while. Beyond the lonely wilderness east of the misty mountains, where dark forests gather beneath heavy clouds, there stands a warm wooden hall surrounded by gardens, stables, and the comforting smell of fresh bread. A place where rain beats harmlessly against thick timber walls, while fires crackle softly through the night. A place watched over by Beorn, great, quiet Beorn of the wild lands. And though the world outside grows darker with each passing season, his house still remains a rare pocket of warmth beside the edge of Mirkwood. So if you enjoy these slow, peaceful journeys through the cozier corners of Middle-earth, feel free to like the video, perhaps leave a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight. Now, settle deeper into your blankets, lower the lanterns, and let us drift softly toward the warm lights of Beorn's house while the storm gathers beyond the hills. The rain begins sometime near dusk, at first only a faint drizzle drifting across the grassy plains west of Mirkwood. Thin silver streaks carried sideways upon the wind, but far above the distant mountains, dark clouds already gather heavily against the fading sky. Travelers moving eastward along the forest road quicken their pace. No one wishes to remain outside after nightfall when storms descend across the wild. Among those travelers are a small company of weary wanderers, wrapped in damp cloaks and road dust. Their horses move slowly now, after many long miles beside muddy rivers and cold hills. The oldest among them glances uneasily toward the darkening clouds. We will not outrun that weather. No one disagrees. Ahead, rolling fields stretch toward the edge of Beorn's lands. Tall grasses bend beneath the rising wind. Beyond them stand fenced gardens, apple trees, and broad wooden barns glowing faint gold in the distance. Warm light, shelter. The travelers feel relief immediately upon seeing it, because the lands surrounding Mirkwood often feel lonely and uncertain. Dark forests to the east, empty hills to the west, long roads where strange things move quietly after sunset. But Beorn's house feels different, safer somehow, though perhaps not entirely less intimidating. Even from afar, the great timber hall appears enormous. Thick wooden beams, a high roof covered in dark straw, wide doors framed by carved animal shapes weathered smooth from years of wind and rain. Smoke rises warmly from stone chimneys into the evening sky. The travelers reach the outer gate shortly before the storm fully arrives. Rain now falls harder across the fields. The horses snort uneasily while thunder murmurs somewhere beyond the mountains. A large black dog watches silently from beneath the stable awning as the travelers approach. Nearby, several horses graze calmly, despite the weather. Strangely calm horses, almost watchful. One traveler lifts a hand cautiously toward the hall. Hello, the house. For several moments, only rain answers. Then the great doors open slowly. Warm golden light spills outward across the wet earth, and there stands Beorn, massive, broad-shouldered, wrapped in dark wool and fur. His presence fills the doorway almost entirely. The travelers fall briefly silent, not from fear exactly, more from sudden awareness that they stand before someone who belongs to the wild lands far more deeply than ordinary men ever could. Beorn studies the soaked company with calm, heavy eyes. Rain drums steadily against the roof overhead. At last he steps aside. You had better come in before the river decides to move indoors. The travelers hurry gratefully into the hall. Warmth washes over them immediately. The great room smells of wood smoke, fresh bread, honey, and drying herbs hanging from the rafters. Long tables stretch across the timber floor. Lanterns glow amber against polished wooden walls. And at the center of the hall, an enormous hearth crackles brightly beneath an iron chimney hood. One traveler nearly sighs aloud at the heat. Wet cloaks are removed quickly, boots left steaming beside the fire. Outside, the storm deepens. Rain lashes the roof in steady waves now, while wind rattles shutters against the dark. But inside Beorn's hall, everything feels steady, oscillate, safe. Beorn says little while the guests settle. He moves calmly through the hall, placing extra logs upon the fire, with one enormous hand. Despite his intimidating size, there is quiet gentleness in the way he tends the hearth. The travelers soon receive thick wool blankets and steaming wooden cups filled with warm honeyed milk. Simple things, yet after long wet roads, such comforts feel nearly magical. One younger traveler sits closest to the fire, rubbing warmth painfully back into cold fingers. Another closes weary eyes while listening to rain against the roof. There is a strange peace in hearing storms from inside safe walls. The knowledge that wind and darkness remain outside while warmth waits within. Beorn eventually disappears briefly into another room before returning carrying large, fresh loaves of bread wrapped in cloth. The smell alone fills the hall. Warm grain, butter, a hint of rosemary. Several travelers exchange exhausted, grateful smiles. No feast in a king's palace could feel more comforting tonight. Soon, thick slices of bread disappear beside bowls of vegetable stew, rich with onions, potatoes, carrots, and herbs from Beorn's gardens. The travelers eat quietly at first, mostly from hunger. Outside, thunder rolls again across the distant hills. Rainwater streams steadily down the windows, but the storm only makes the hall feel cozier, the firelight brighter, the wooden walls warmer. One traveler eventually asks softly, "Does the storm often grow this fierce?" Beorn glances toward the windows. Worse in winter. Then, after a moment, he adds, "The mountains send their weather where they please." Again, silence settles comfortably around the room. No one feels pressure to speak constantly here. The crackling hearth provides enough company. One by one, the travelers begin relaxing fully for the first time in many days. The storm rages steadily beyond the hall. Yet inside, lantern light glows warmly against timber beams, while steam rises softly from fresh bread beside the fire. And somewhere near the kitchen doorway, one of Beorn's great dogs curls quietly into sleep, while rain drums endlessly upon the roof above. The storm deepens fully after nightfall. Rain lashes against the timber walls in steady waves while wind moans softly through the trees surrounding Beorn's lands. Beyond the windows, darkness swallows the fields entirely. Only occasional flashes of distant lightning reveal the outline of fences, gardens, and rolling hills disappearing into the wet night. But inside the great hall, warmth gathers thick and golden beneath the lantern light. The enormous hearth burns steadily at the center of the room. Logs crackle softly while orange flames dance across polished beams, darkened by years of smoke and winter fires. The travelers settle deeper into their seats around the long wooden tables. Wet cloaks now hang drying beside the hearth. Steam rises faintly from damp boots lined carefully near the warmth. One younger traveler wraps both hands around a wooden mug filled with hot tea, sweetened by forest honey. The heat seeps pleasantly into cold fingers, still stiff from the road. Outside, thunder rolls once more across the distant mountains. Yet the sound feels strangely comforting here, a reminder of how thick the walls are, how safe the hall remains against the storm. Beorn moves quietly through the room, carrying another armful of wood toward the fire. Despite his great size, his footsteps remain surprisingly soft upon the timber floor. The travelers watch him with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Few people know much about Beorn, only stories. Stories of a solitary shapeshifter living beside the wild. Stories of great black bears roaming the forests under moonlight. Stories whispered by traders crossing dangerous roads near Mirkwood. Yet tonight, Beorn seems less like a legend and more like a patient host tending a warm home during bad weather. He places fresh logs upon the hearth. Sparks rise briefly toward the chimney. Then the flames settle once more into deep, glowing warmth. One traveler finally gathers enough courage to ask, "Do you live here alone?" Beorn considers the question while pouring warm soup into another bowl. Mostly, the answer hangs quietly in the room. No one presses further. Side rainwater streams steadily down the windows in silver trails. The younger traveler near the fire watches droplets race each other across the glass, while exhaustion slowly overtakes him. There is something deeply soothing about storms when heard from safe shelter. The rhythm of rain, the distant rumble of thunder, the crackling fire answering softly from within. Fresh butter melts slowly across thick bread still warm from the oven. Bowls of stew steam gently beneath lantern light. Simple food, comforting food, the kind meant for cold nights and weary people. At some point, Beorn disappears briefly into the kitchen and returns carrying a large plate stacked high with honey cakes. The smell alone fills the hall with warmth. Cinnamon, roasted nuts, sweet honey gathered from hives hidden among the western fields. One traveler nearly laughs from relief upon tasting the first bite. Soft, warm, perfectly sweet after long, damp roads. Even Beorn's great dogs wander closer now, hoping for crumbs beside the tables. Massive, shaggy creatures with calm, intelligent eyes. One settles heavily beside the hearth with a satisfied sigh, while another rests near the doorway, listening to the storm. The travelers slowly begin speaking more freely as the evening deepens. Not loudly, only the soft, tired conversations common among people, finally growing comfortable after difficult travel. Road stories. Rainstorms survived. Tales of crowded inns near Bree, and lonely crossings beside the Anduin. Beorn listens occasionally while cleaning heavy iron cookware beside the fire. Though he speaks little, there is no coldness in his silence, only calm, the calm of someone long accustomed to solitude and the slow rhythms of the wilderness. One older traveler eventually asks whether the roads near Mirkwood remain dangerous. Beorn glances briefly toward the dark windows. The forest keeps its own counsel. Again, the room grows quieter after that. Everyone knows the reputation of Mirkwood, the heavy shadows beneath its trees, the strange silence haunting deeper paths. Yet somehow Beorn's hall feels even cozier because of the darkness beyond it. Warmth always feels stronger when storms gather outside. The younger traveler nearest the fire gradually drifts toward sleep, sitting upright in his chair. His mug rests forgotten beside cooling embers. Another traveler quietly drapes a blanket over his shoulders. Small kindnesses emerge naturally in places like this, especially during long storms. Hours pass gently beneath lantern light. The storm never fully weakens. Rain continues drumming steadily upon the roof while wind brushes through the surrounding fields. But inside the hall, time seems slower somehow, softer. The fire glows deep orange now. Shadows flicker lazily across wooden walls carved with old animal patterns and forest symbols. One of the travelers notices bunches of drying herbs hanging from the rafters above. Lavender, sage, mint. Their faint scents mingle pleasantly with wood smoke and warm bread. The hall feels lived in, comfortable, a true refuge beside the wild lands. Eventually, Beorn rises from his seat and carries several thick blankets toward a row of sleeping spaces prepared near the far side of the hall. "You'll rest there tonight," he says simply. The travelers thank him quietly. No one wishes to return outside now, not while the storm still shakes the dark fields beyond the windows. One by one, the guests settle beneath heavy wool blankets while the fire continues glowing warmly nearby. The dogs curl into sleep beside the hearth. Rain whispers endlessly against the roof, and somewhere beyond the safe, lantern-lit walls of Beorn's house, the forests and mountains of the wild disappear beneath storm and darkness. But here, beside the fire, the travelers finally rest. Warm, dry, passive from the rain. Let us settle deeper now into the warmth of Beorn's hall, while the storm rolls endlessly across the dark wild lands beyond the windows. Sometime after midnight, the rain grows even heavier. Water rushes steadily from the roof in silver streams, while wind presses against the timber walls with long, low sighs. Yet inside the hall, the warmth remains steady. The great hearth glows softly beneath layers of deep orange embers. Shadows drift lazily across the ceiling beams. The travelers sleep peacefully beneath thick wool blankets, while storm light flickers faintly through the shuttered windows. One traveler murmurs softly in dreams before settling again beside the fire. Another sleeps curled beneath two blankets, with boots still resting nearby to dry. The long roads have worn everyone down thoroughly. There is a special kind of exhaustion that follows days of cold rain and uncertain travel, the kind eased only by safety, warm food, and the sound of weather remaining outside. Beorn alone remains awake. He sits near the hearth upon a heavy wooden chair, carved from dark oak. One enormous hand rests against the armrest while he quietly watches the flames. The firelight softens the harsher edges of his face. Outside his lands, travelers speak of Beorn with caution, sometimes fear. But tonight, he seems less like a wild legend and more like an old guardian keeping watch over weary guests. One of the great dogs lifts its head briefly from beside the hearth. Beorn scratches behind its ears absent-mindedly before the creature settles back into sleep with a contented sigh. The hall smells warmly now of smoke, honey cakes, damp wool, and cedar wood burning slowly in the fire. Rain continues drumming endlessly overhead. The rhythm becomes almost hypnotic, soft, steady, endless. Eventually, one younger traveler wakes quietly and notices Beorn still sitting beside the fire. For a moment, he says nothing. The hall feels too peaceful to disturb. At last, he speaks softly. Beorn glances toward the storm-dark windows. The weather keeps me listening. The traveler nods, as though understanding. though perhaps no ordinary traveler truly understands what it means to belong so deeply to the wild lands. The younger man rises carefully from beneath his blankets and moves closer to the fire. Beorn silently hands in another cup of warm milk sweetened with honey. Steam curls upward into the dim lantern light. The traveler warms his hands against the cup while listening to thunder rolling faintly across distant hills. It feels strange, he admits after a while. What does? Being comfortable again. Beorn studies the flames quietly. The road takes comfort from people slowly. Again, silence settles, but it feels gentle. The younger traveler stares into the hearth. The flames move hypnotically across blackened logs. Small sparks drift upward toward the chimney before vanishing into darkness. Outside, the storm seems impossibly far away now, despite the rain still hammering the roof. There is a peculiar peace found only in safe shelters during terrible weather. A feeling older than kingdoms, ancient as the first fires lit against the night. The traveler eventually notices shelves lining portions of the hall walls, clay jars, bundles of herbs, polished wooden bowls, heavy iron pots hanging from hooks. Everything within Beorn's house feels practical, made to last, nothing delicate, nothing wasteful. The younger man asks quietly, "Do many travelers stay here?" "Some. And the others?" Beorn glances once more toward the storm. They pass quickly. The traveler smiles faintly into his cup, perhaps wisely. Hours drift onward beside the hearth. The younger traveler gradually grows sleepy again beneath the warmth and endless rhythm of the rain. At some point, Beorn disappears briefly into the kitchen and returns carrying another fresh loaf wrapped carefully in cloth. Even in the middle of the night, the smell of warm bread spreads instantly through the hall. Rich grain, butter, a touch of honey. The traveler laughs softly in disbelief. "You baked more bread." Beorn tears off a piece calmly. "Storms make people hungry." The younger man accepts the bread gratefully. Outside, lightning flashes briefly behind the shutters. Thunder follows several moments later, rolling deeply across the wilderness. Yet the hall remains steady and warm. The traveler eats slowly while sleepiness settles heavier across his thoughts. Somewhere nearby, one of the dogs snores softly beside the hearth. The sound feels oddly comforting. Eventually, the younger traveler returns beneath his blankets near the fire. The wool feels wonderfully warm now. His eyelids grow heavy almost immediately. Before sleep fully returns, he glances once more toward Beorn, sitting quietly beside the glowing hearth. Still awake, still listening to the storm. A calm guardian, keeping watch through the long dark hours, while rain sweeps across the wild lands beyond his home. The traveler closes his eyes. The storm continues. The fire crackles softly. Warmth surrounds the hall like another blanket. And little by little, every weary soul beneath Beorn's roof drifts once more into peaceful sleep, while the rain sings endlessly against the world outside. Let us remain a little longer beside the fire, while the storm wanders through the dark wild lands beyond Beorn's warm hall. The deepest part of night settles quietly over the house. Outside, rain still falls steadily across the fields surrounding the homestead. Water drips from fences. Wind moves through apple trees, stripped nearly bare by autumn. And somewhere beyond the hills, swollen rivers rush cold through darkness toward Mirkwood. But inside the great timber hall, everything feels still. Safe, the fire burns low and steady now. Orange embers pulse softly beneath thick black logs, while faint warmth lingers through every corner of the room. Exhaustion has finally loosened its grip enough to allow proper rest. One older traveler snores quietly. Another sleeps with both hands tucked beneath his cheek like a child, despite years spent upon hard roads. The storm outside only deepens the comfort within. Rain against windows, wind against beams, the endless, peaceful sound of weather kept safely beyond strong walls. Beorn eventually rises from his chair beside the hearth. The wooden floor creaks softly beneath his heavy steps. Without waking the guests, he moves calmly through the hall, checking shutters against the wind. Every movement feels practiced. The small, nightly rituals of someone who has weathered countless storms beside the wild. One shutter rattles sharply as another gust presses against the house. Beorn secures it with a quiet grunt before pausing near the window. Outside, darkness covers the fields almost completely. Only lightning far beyond the mountains briefly reveals the rolling land. For a moment, the world beyond the hall looks enormous, wet, cold, lonely. Then darkness swallows it once more. Beorn returns toward the hearth, carrying another heavy log beneath one arm. The fire crackles brightly again as fresh sparks whirl upward. Warm golden light spreads across the sleeping hall. One of the dogs lifts its head sleepily before settling again nearer the flames. The smell of cedar smoke mingles softly with drying herbs hanging above, lavender, mint, sage, gathered during warmer months. The hall carries the scent of a place built for surviving long winters, a true refuge against the wilderness. Hours drift by gently. At some point before dawn, the rain finally begins easing. The thunder grows more distant. Wind softens gradually across the hills. The travelers continue sleeping, while the storm slowly tires itself against the wild lands. One younger traveler wakes briefly during the quieting rain. For several moments, he simply lies listening. The crackling fire, the distant dripping outside, the deep, peaceful silence settling slowly through the hall after many hours of storm. He realizes then how long it has been since he truly felt safe. Not cautious, not alert, safe. Roads across Middle-earth often teach people to remain half-watchful even during rest. Bad weather, lonely forests, stories of wolves or worse things moving through the dark. But tonight, beneath Beorn's roof, those worries feel impossibly far away. The traveler watches the ceiling beams overhead glowing softly beneath firelight. Carved wooden patterns twist along the rafters, leaves, animals, old forest symbols worn smooth by time and smoke. Everything within the hall feels sturdy enough to outlast storms for generations. Eventually, his eyes drift toward the windows. The rain has softened now to little more than a gentle whisper against the glass. And beyond the clouds, faint pale moonlight begins slowly returning across the fields. The storm is passing. The strange, quiet peace follows in its wake. The traveler closes his eyes once more, while the final rain drifts softly over the homestead. Sleep comes easily now, deep and warm. At last, dawn begins approaching beyond the eastern hills. The clouds thin gradually above the wildlands. Silver morning light touches the wet fields surrounding Beorn's house. Mist rises softly from the grasslands. Water gleams upon fences and garden stones. Inside the hall, the hearth still glows warmly against the cool morning air. One by one, the travelers begin waking beneath blankets and firelight, stretching stiff muscles, listening to the quieter world outside. The younger traveler from earlier sits up slowly and notices the silence first. No thunder, no hard rain, only dripping water and distant birds beginning to sing somewhere beyond the barns. Beorn already moves through the kitchen preparing breakfast. The smell soon fills the hall. Fresh bread, porridge simmering with cream, warm honey. Morning comfort after a long storm. The travelers exchange sleepy, grateful smiles while wrapping blankets tighter around themselves near the fire. Outside, pale sunlight slowly spreads across the wet fields west of Mirkwood. The storm has passed, and for one quiet morning beside the edge of the wild lands, the world feels peaceful once more. Morning settles gently over Beorn's lands. The storm clouds continue drifting eastward beyond Mirkwood, while pale sunlight spreads slowly across the wet fields surrounding the Great Hall. Every blade of grass glistens with rain. Water drips softly from fences and stable roofs. Mist curls low above the distant riverbanks, where the wild lands still sleep beneath fading gray skies. Inside the hall, warmth lingers pleasantly after the long storm. The great hearth still burns low and steady, while breakfast fills the room with comforting smells. Fresh bread cooling beside wooden boards, warm porridge sweetened with honey, herbal tea steaming gently in thick clay cups. The travelers gather slowly around the long tables wrapped in blankets and sleeping morning quiet. No one rushes. After nights of difficult roads and heavy weather, peaceful mornings feel precious. One younger traveler steps briefly outside while carrying a cup of warm tea. The cold morning air brushes softly against his face. The world smells wonderfully clean after the storm. Wet earth, rain-soaked grass, fresh pine drifting from the distant woods. Above him, the sky slowly brightens into pale silver blue. Only a few lingering clouds remain over the mountains far away. He stands there quietly for several moments, listening to the peaceful sounds surrounding Beorn's homestead. Chickens scratching near the gardens, horses drifting calmly within the stables. Water dripping rhythmically from roof edges into puddles below. And somewhere farther across the fields, bees already humming softly among late autumn flowers. The storm feels impossibly distant now. That is one of the strange comforts of weather. No matter how fierce the night becomes, morning still arrives eventually. The traveler returns inside carrying cool air and the scent of rain with him. The hall feels even warmer after stepping outdoors. Beorn places another fresh loaf upon the table without ceremony. Steam rises from the bread into the lantern-lit room. One of the older travelers smiles tiredly. If we stay much longer, we may never leave. Beorn snorts softly. Then you would need to help with the chores. A few quiet laughs move around the table. The warmth of the hall has slowly softened everyone. Even Beorn's silence now feels welcoming rather than intimidating. The travelers spend the rest of the morning helping where they can. One repairs harness straps beside the stable. Another gathers fallen branches scattered by the storm. A younger traveler helps carry baskets of apples from the orchard, while the great dogs wander calmly through the wet grass nearby. Simple, peaceful work, the kind that feels satisfying after long, anxious journeys. Beorn's lands remain strangely untouched by the wider worries of Middle-earth. Not entirely safe, the wild still surrounds them. Mirkwood looms dark upon the eastern horizon. The mountains remain cold and distant to the west. Yet, within the boundaries of Beorn's fields and gardens, life follows slower rhythms. Bread baking, wood splitting, animals fed before sunset, lanterns lit against approaching night. A small world protected carefully from the growing darkness beyond. By afternoon, the sky clears fully. Golden sunlight washes warmly across the homestead. Rainwater sparkles upon the leaves of the orchard trees. The travelers sit for a while beside the fence overlooking the fields, while drinking tea and enjoying the rare comfort of doing absolutely nothing. No roads to hurry along, no danger pressing close. Only quiet warmth after the storm. One traveler eventually asks Beorn whether he ever grows lonely living so far from towns and cities. Beorn considers the question while watching clouds drift above the fields. The wild keeps company enough. Again, the travelers fall silent, thoughtfully. And somehow the answer feels true. There are some places in Middle-earth where silence does not feel empty, only peaceful. The afternoon drifts slowly onward. Birdsong returns fully after the storm. A gentle breeze moves through the grasslands. Far beyond the fields, sunlight touches the dark edge of Mirkwood, where the forest rises thick and ancient against the horizon. The travelers know they must continue east eventually. Roads still wait, journeys unfinished. But for now, no one speaks much about leaving, because places like Beorn's Hall are rare. A warm refuge beside dangerous lands. A house where storms become something cozy rather than frightening. Where weary travelers can rest deeply beside firelight while rain sings harmlessly against the roof. As evening slowly approaches once more, lanterns begin glowing softly around the homestead. Golden lights against the cooling twilight. The travelers help prepare supper while smoke rises peacefully from the chimneys. Another calm night waits ahead. No storm this time, only the quiet breathing of the wild lands beneath the stars. And somewhere beyond the darkening hills, rivers continue flowing eastward past forests, mountains, and forgotten roads across Middle-earth. But here, beside the warm hall of Beorn, the world feels wonderfully small, simple, safe. The travelers gather once more beside the great hearth as darkness settles gently beyond the windows. The fire crackles, the dogs sleep heavily nearby, fresh bread cools upon the tables. And little by little, peaceful exhaustion settles across the hall again. Outside, the storm has vanished completely. The stars now shine clearly above the wild lands beyond Mirkwood, cold and beautiful over the quiet fields. But inside Beorn's house, warmth remains, steady as firelight, and for one long gentle night beside the edge of the wilderness, every weary traveler rests safely beyond the storm.